and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man with a head full of ideas, a heart full of emotions, and a belly full of pie,
Tim Longo.
Hey, Tim Longo, happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You know, a few days late.
Yeah. Can you hear the... Oh, damn cat.
I can hear the cat, but it's okay. It's
Timing
that
is
darn
perfect.
cat. We're tying in with Walt Disney now as well. That's a deep cut. That shows my age.
Yeah, I would say so. That darn cat. I don't... Was that... Come on. We can't start off with that darn cat. That's just such a weird...
That is a great science fiction reference right there.
It is.
Bill Bixby, which ties us to The Incredible Hulk. I mean, come on. How can you go wrong?
Oh, my God. What a weird...
Yes.
6 degrees of Kevin Bacon thing going on there.
Yes, it is. Okay, you know what? And the Hulk, of course, is now owned by Marvel, which is owned by Walt Disney, which also owns Star Wars, which brings us to our game tonight.
Well done.
TIE Fighter. Star Wars TIE Fighter. This is a game that came out in 1994. It is one of the first, it may be the first Star Wars flight sim I ever played in preparation for developing, Star Wars Starfighter. Tell me about Larry Holland. I mean, I don't know how to segue. Tell me about Larry Holland. Well, he's kind of a legend as far as these games go, and in particular LucasArts.
Oh my God,
in
Cat.
part because of his independent spirit.
Sorry, yeah. We were talking about this in pre-show. Larry had kind of an interesting career at LucasArts because he was, I believe, the entire time he was working on the games that they published, he was technically independent. But he did work at the ranch, and he was on site for those early years, and he would have known, Ron and Tim and all those guys, Ron Gilbert and Tim Schafer. But they weren't making the same stuff. And at the time, as we probably talked about during the Dot series, LucasArts wasn't making Star Wars games, and they weren't allowed to because of all the deals that were in place. And so he actually started off doing World War II sims, basically, of that era. And this was I remember as a gamer myself playing on my old PC days. Chuck Yeager was out, and those infamous old school, Falcon. All of those sims were kind of a weird niche thing because they showed off the power, the quote unquote power of the PC at the time, right? Flight sims were kind of one of the genres that were big, and he made this trilogy of World War II based flight sims that eventually became X-Wing and TIE Fighter, and the legacy is very clearly connected. But they were great games in and of themselves.
Yeah, I mean the secret weapons of the Luftwaffe was another one that
classic.
Darren Stinnett had especially recommended to me. In part because of its kind of fantastic ships or planes and whatnot.
Yeah, there was an alternate fiction kind of feel to it, and
yeah, exactly. It feels like it feels a little bit like the Battlezone reboot from the early 2000s, where it tells a different story of a particular conflict, and imagines it, and that kind of ties in with the sort of Lucas reimagining of World War II and Indiana Jones, right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of tied up in that game in particular.
Yeah, it was in the the subconscious of the company, I'm sure, and there were some historical aspects obviously majorly thrown in there, but there were their own spin in the obviously I haven't played those games in a long time, and I don't think I finished all of them. The Battlehawks 1942, Their Finest Hour, and then Secret Weapons of the Luftwaffe. But the thing about Secret Weapons is that it was showing the perspective of the bad guys, right?
Right.
And which is a theme that we'll talk probably a lot about in TIE Fighter. And, based on similar engine, I believe, it was all based on their same tech, and they just morphed it into, space and flight simulation in space. And then, of course, Wing Commander was, not far after this, or maybe around the same time. We should look that one up. We'll look at that one up later. But so flight sims was an important genre to this era. And then I remember playing X-Wing, man, when it came out way before I was in the industry, and just, mind blowing.
Wing Commander's 1991, so it's definitely pretty contemporaneous with this trilogy. X-Wing was 93, and with the other flight sims.
Was X-Wing let's see.
Yeah, I think it was 93.
Yeah, 93. Yeah, 93. Yeah. So it was a perfect marriage. Larry's, and then not long after TIE Fighter, he officially started Totally Games. And then one of the first games that I worked on as a tester at LucasArts was X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, which, as you were playing both X-Wing and TIE Fighter separately before this, there was the dream of, wouldn't it be awesome for this to be multiplayer? And that's exactly what they did.
And it's a natural. I mean, space games are great for multiplayer because you only have the objects in space to deal with, right? I mean, you don't have a lot of physics or whatever to deal with. Things burst apart and they're just pieces. There's a million reasons why you'd want to do a space game as your first multiplayer game. Okay, so getting to the game proper, I'm gonna open with a question to spring this on you.
Okay, good.
To what degree does this game evoke Star Wars for you? And are there other Star Wars games that evoke it more? And what makes this Star Wars game evoke Star Wars? Is it at the top of the list? Is it near the top of the list? Is it somewhere in the middle? It's, okay. I have my own answer to this question, which is why I asked it.
I guess this is our first Star Wars game, now that I think about it. Yeah,
it is. It is.
Duh.
It's our second LucasArts game, but it's our first Star Wars game. And of course we're tying it in with, Rogue One, which comes out in 3 weeks or so as of this recording. Yeah,
that was our inspiration for...
And I think last night tickets became available, or maybe the night before, so it's a lot of gamers cross over to Star Wars, I think, and they'll be thinking about this. Yeah. But yeah, I mean...
As far as when... Now, for me, it would be X-Wing, because I played that first when it came out. But I'll kind of tie both of them together. And I'm trying to think back... And I think the answer is yes. That this is the most. This probably X-Wing specifically, and then TIE Fighter being a better refinement of the formula, really do represent the best example of a Star Wars fantasy fulfillment in a wish fulfillment in a video game form for me as a young gamer. The one
that's interesting.
The one that's after this.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, so the thing is when I look back, Dark Forces is the one that comes to mind immediately. That's probably had the biggest influence on me overall. But the thing about X-Wing and TIE Fighter both is, and I didn't remember this really, I hadn't thought about it until we started playing this, sitting in the cockpit and the sense of, for the time, full immersion and this nostalgia that I'm having playing this game, even the lo-fi music and the low-res cinematics and all that stuff is it just all comes swooping back to me, and that just flying through space in your own freaking TIE Fighter. It's just something about it.
Yeah, no, and I would agree with that aspect of it. Both of these games from a cockpit view, which is something you see in the films, right? So you definitely, you have the sense. I mean, normally you see TIE Fighter pilots, you see the pilots of the TIE Fighters, and you see the instrumentation to some degree you often see them in profile in the X-Files, in the X-Wings. So you actually see more of the cockpit, I think, in the X-Wings than you normally do in the TIE Fighters. Not entirely, though. I mean, there are shots. But anyway, I mean, But the thing that actually I think this does better than X-Wing is all the stuff around it. The X-Wing had a very similar kind of I don't know if you want to call it a lobby or whatever. I mean, the front end.
Yeah, the concourse.
Where you're in this building, and you're going to run missions from there. And for me, it never entirely fit with X-Wing because it's one thing. And with the Rebellion, you feel like these are people who are moving from place to place.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Whereas in TIE Fighter, it's like, oh, I'm on the concourse of this, I don't know, Star Destroyer, or I guess whatever, and they're all the same. Like, it doesn't matter what Star Destroyer I'm on; they're all going to be the same.
Yeah,
and it makes total sense to me that it would just look the same every time. And so I felt, it's funny because I thought back a little bit, playing this to Starfighter. And this is something we never even discussed for Starfighter, a sort of central hub like this where you would, replay missions. I mean, it never came up at all, ever. And it's funny because I think, in part, that's because we had multiple characters. And so there wasn't a sense that you were one person in one place ever, and in fact, in several points, you're kind of launching from different places. And I sort of feel like we didn't even realize we're losing a little something from that. I mean, not a huge thing, but something, to not have that kind of sense of place.
Yeah, there's, and as you were talking, I was trying to think about your question, and oh my gosh, Kat, and Dark Forces, and why I brought that one up as well. But when you mentioned Starfighter, like both in Starfighter's case and in Dark Forces' case, you're playing a character, and there is a story, essentially a narrative, basically linear, that is driving things forward. And one of the notes that I wrote down that I think is an important topic to talk about with Larry's games is that there was always this sense that you're playing your own pilot, and you're going to follow the career of that pilot, and it's just you. There is a macro story of stuff going on, but it's very military, very simulation, and it's very based on the theaters of war. Versus Starfighter, we had 3 characters, and we were telling their stories. And yeah, there were space battles, but there was a beginning, middle, and end to it all. And this is simulating a military career,
Right.
And that was one of the things I loved about it, because as a young, I wasn't a kid at the time, but as a younger than I am now gamer, I was a pilot, But but the differences between X-Wing and TIE Fighter, that's a good point. The fictional wrapper fits better for TIE Fighter.
Yeah, I mean, it feels super officious, and it's everything. I mean, it's the guy who gives you, the voice actor they got, and I should look this up, but voice actor they got to do the debriefing and the briefing.
Oh, it's so good.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely perfect. And we should say that the original version wouldn't have had those voices. That's kind of a collector's edition, special edition sort of thing, because I don't think, this game probably shipped on discs, and those voices were added later. Yeah. But they're amazing. They're so good. And that one in particular, the Emperor's guy is okay, but the guy who actually gives the briefings that could not have been better cast. I mean, just that voice is perfect.
Yeah, you really want to click on the responses afterwards to hear what he has to say.
What happened? What did I do? What did I accomplish? And that's
and the writing's good too. It is. It's actually really, and that's something that I haven't played this in so long. I've forgotten about the wrapper around all of the missions, right? And when I think back, I'm always thinking about the missions themselves or something.
Right, and the cockpit view, and the feeling of dogfighting in a TIE Fighter, and we'll get to all of that.
Yeah, but but just the context and the wrapper and the interstitial stuff, it, as far as, that's the other thing that I forgot to mention earlier when it comes to Larry's, legacy. The World War II games had some of that as well, but Star Wars makes a really good, wrapper for military conflict like this, because it's such a melodramatic, like pulpy, science fiction-y. It's like there can be all this weird, kind of out of place feeling of drama in this simulation, because it's Star Wars, and you can do that some with World War II, but you got to take liberties, etc. And it's a real war and blah blah blah. But Star Wars is perfect for like having some of these weird, this glue that's holding it together. Where you're like, yeah, I'm working for the Empire, and this all makes sense.
And to compare it to Wing Commander, it's a glue you don't have to build up from the ground up, right? So
I never got into Wing Commander myself.
Yeah, you get a lot from people just knowing Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just knowing that there's this huge empire and this huge military force, and just riding right along with that and not having to do a lot of work to establish, well, why do they have these different simulators and why do they look the way they do? It's just, oh yeah, I saw that in the movie. That's what Darth Vader was in to communicate with the Emperor, or, what have you. Like, this is, oh, of course they've got, this this view out their front window because I saw the movie and they've got like 8 windows out the front of a TIE fighter or whatever it is. I mean, it's just, you have all these things that you don't have to explain and people just kind of bask in it. If they even pay attention to it at all, they just kind of go, oh yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. Well,
then one of the fun things they do in this one more than X-Wing, which is I think why I ultimately like, even though I have a nostalgia for X-Wing, TIE Fighter is my favorite of the two, is they add to that those preconceived notions like you're mentioning. Yeah, we know the movies, but then they add in the Secret Order of the Emperor and like this whole subplot thing where it's like, oh wait, the Emperor? Oh yeah, I know who he is. Oh, and he has a secret society of folks that are following him around and doing stuff for him, and he's got a spy network and stuff, and it's like this counter, this counter programming is going on in the middle of missions, and you have these 2 different masters, and so there was a nice little addition that gives you this sense of intrigue that added to the films.
Yeah, it does. It adds a bit of spice that really kind of I don't know, enlivens it a little bit. To just feel like, because and I think we'll get back to that when we talk about missions proper. But I felt like a lot of times I was doing the Secret Order, of the Emperor bonus objectives or whatever, despite the fact that they added a lot of time to the missions, and they weren't themselves all that fun. They didn't add a lot often, in terms
and they're usually pretty kind of boring and basic.
Yeah, it's like, oh, go identify, go scan these things or whatever, and we'll get to that. But okay. So the first decision point you have here is what you name your pilot. Because as you pointed out, like you're following this one pilot, and you get to go in and you register at the front desk, and I guess you can register multiple ones and be doing multiple saves at one time. I don't know why you would do that with this game, but what did you name your pilot? Was it James Taylor?
I think James Taylor the cat that is bugging me right now. We're gonna have to take a break, and I'm gonna do something about this in a second. Yes, our cat's name is James Taylor, and she is a she. Anyway, I named mine Yoda.
Well, of course you did.
Of course I did.
Right, Yoda flying missions for the Empire.
Yeah,
that's good.
That's good. So meta, right? But I did want to talk really quick before you answer what you named your pilot. To your question about like being able to make multiple pilots and all this, it is an interesting, I think, thing to at least mention quickly. The save / backup structure of the game, right? There really aren't save games. You just have your pilot, and it just keeps track of what mission you're on. And if you fail a mission, you have to start over. And basically, if you go to the menu, you back up your pilot. You can do that on a disc, but there isn't, there's not a save. It's just your pilot's career. And even when you lose a mission or die in the middle of a mission, they have a cutscene that shows you coming back to base and like getting healed, right? Like they've actually fully closed the network of all the possibilities. It's not like you die and then, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's all a consistent.
You're right. It is,
which is a weird choice. They wouldn't need to do that, but they did it.
Yeah, so, you almost imagine that they're saving. Like every save file is probably the exact same size because they're just saving exactly the right number of bits per mission for what you did. You know, it's like, oh, there's 7 objectives, and I fulfilled 4 of them, you know, whatever. And they're just, you know, writing out a 32-bit int for each level. All right, you go take care of James Taylor, and we'll come right back. Okay, back from our cat break.
Sorry, everybody.
It's okay. You know, it's good.
She was having a moment.
It's good to have, you know, now we know you're human and not, I don't know, what the hell is Yoda?
I don't even know his species, but my wife calls me a robot, so yeah, it is a good reminder.
That's good.
I am human. So I chose Yoda. Yoda was my name. And
so I'm going to ask you, what do you think I named my pilot? Assuming it's not like some variation on my name, which would be reasonable. You know, what would you guess?
You know, the only thing that comes to mind, how do I get the right answer on this? This is impossible. The only thing that comes to my mind is, and this is an inside joke that the audience won't care about, but who was the villain in Deus Ex that you sent me?
Oh, yeah, Bob Page.
Bob Page.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Wow. No, I'm not.
That's a selfish answer, because why would you do that? Because there would be
I wouldn't. No, this is much more Star Warsy. But
okay. No, I don't know. Admiral Snack Bar.
Okay. No, I went with 38.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Well
done.
Very much. Well done. Spelled out or the numbers?
I spelled it out just because I didn't know if it would. I didn't know what was going to happen if you led off of the name with a number.
You didn't put hexadecimals in.
So, yeah, no, I typed out 38. Nice. That's the character that you ostensibly play in Republic Commando. So, I like that tie-in of like, you know, here I am. I'm this number. I don't even have a name.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and we talked a lot about TIE Fighter when we were making RC, right? The sense of the perspective of the quote unquote bad / good guys and all that kind of stuff. And
and a military perspective.
Faceless, nameless, kind of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, so let's you know, I guess technically the opening cinematic comes before you get to name your character, but one of the things I appreciated in the opening cinematic, and maybe we can kind of delve into how this ties into you playing the bad guy, but I love how the opening cinematic makes it very clear that the enemy is who you've normally associated as the good guys. Like it's very clear that, you know, and it's propagandistic as well. I mean, it says, you know, in the text crawl, it says something like, you know, they're terrorists who destroyed a symbol of imperial power, you know, which is just like the most 2016 thing ever at the moment. And it also blows up some X-Wings, you know, right there at the end of, I mean, so it's very like upfront of, you know, you are not, you know, you're not who you normally play in these games. You're not, you know, you're not the good guy rebels, you know, with their funky haircuts, you know, and their, you know, scruffy-looking nerf herders. You know, you're the bad guy. You're the nameless, faceless. You know, they show the pilot. They give a shot that's basically from the movies of the pilot. In that suit, and kind of moving around, which is a technically difficult thing at the time. I actually kind of want to go back and look at that and be like, how did they do that? But it was pre-animated, so they could do whatever they wanted. But it's just kind of that same thing that they did a lot, where they showed the guy from the, you know, the camera would have been placed basically at his controls, and they're showing his, you know, his face, you know, as he's flying in this nameless, faceless way. So anyway, I mean, it's a total invert of the sort of expected paradigm for these games. Yeah,
and your point about propaganda, like the text crawl specifically just fully commits to the brainwashed perspective of the Empire, which I really love, like calling the rebels terrorists, you know, very specifically. And as a fan of Star Wars, like to have somebody to be playing as a character whose, you know, military leaders are saying that about the rebels, knowing that the rebels are the good guys, it sort of elicits a certain kind of emotion, right? We're like, what? You can't call them terrorists. That's, wait a second, you know, for me at least. And then,
whoever's in power gets to call other
people.
Yeah,
no, agreed. That's what I mean.
Right? I mean,
that text crawl is
wonderful
history. Yeah,
yeah, it's wonderful the way that it takes, that establishing thing that's been in every Star Wars game. Like, actually, we may not have done one for Republic Commando, but
no, we did not, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah, but in basically every Star Wars game, except for our last one, there's a text crawl which explains what's going on, and it's always the rebels. It's always the heroes, the film heroes who are kind of you're telling their story.
So good.
And it's interesting to me too in that this is the second game in the trilogy. And in that way, it sort of parallels the second movie in the trilogy, where the bad guys ostensibly are in charge, right? I mean, in Empire, it's more about
the first
more about Darth and his power, and things look pretty bleak by the end, and a lot of our heroes is kind of scattered, and this follows that paradigm really, really well, and I wouldn't have expected that from a video game.
And the first few battles relate to that whole state of the galaxy at that time.
It talks about Hoth.
You start with Hoth, and the themes, are kind of about that, the rebels being scattered, and or it seems like I'm forgetting the stuff later on, but you know what I mean. Like it reinforces the state of the galaxy at the time.
And at the same time, it's tying into a new trilogy, because at this time, the Thrawn trilogy, which were the books, and maybe I think this will be kind of the last of the mythology. And I only read one of these books, so I can't really tell you much about them. I read them all, Yeah, but there's
Heir to the Empire.
There was a time at which basically, I guess Lucasfilm or George Lucas himself decided there wasn't going to be a third trilogy. They just weren't going to get around to it. And so rather than films 7, 8, and 9, they had someone write them. And it involved his character, General Thrawn, in the sort of vacuum of power that was created when the Emperor died. So
I think he's an admiral, but he might be...
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Admiral. Yeah, Admiral. Yeah. But yeah, Space Fleet. Yeah, so Admiral Thrawn, who appears here, is...
which I forgot about. I was like... And I'm a Thrawn fan, and I was like, oh my god, Thrawn! I forgot,
Yeah, I only read the first book, and I thought to myself, Star Wars books are not well written.
So those three weren't bad. Yeah, anyway, we don't have to get on the... Yeah, but he's a cool character. I think he's pretty good. As far
as heir to the Empire, right?
Yeah. Heir to the Empire.
And do you remember the author? Because I don't.
It's on the tip of my tongue.
Timothy something?
Oh, Timothy Zahn. Yeah, right.
Okay. Yep. Timothy Zahn. So this was, it was kind of funny because I was in college when the first of those books came out, and I had a science fiction enthused girlfriend at the time, and she was totally into reading the new Star Wars book when it came out. And so I mean that's why I read it, basically, because at that point I was 10 years distant from having watched the Star Wars movie.
Well, to your point about like flipping the formula, one note I wrote down that is a nuanced thing that I'm kind of trying to transport myself back to, but in the way that the HUD would represent enemies and friendlies in X-Wing, right? The rebels were green and the Empire were red,
right?
In the HUD, and so in this game, when you start playing, that is still consistent,
right?
Which would break typical, UI design paradigms, right? Because you generally want the enemy to be red, so you are looking for the threat, right? But they intentionally kept that in there because it's flipping the formula on the game you played the previous year, where you were the rebels, right? And you were shooting at the guys that were red, and now you're the red guy shooting at the green guys, and that.
Well, and also follows the lightsaber rules, right? That's where that comes from.
Yeah, it does.
At least from the original movies.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And then we shouldn't
before
even
Mace Windu came along with his lavender blade.
Yeah. Well, then we shouldn't even get into the laser colored problem and debate with all of that. But they kept that canonical, but because it's flipped for that. But anyway, my point being is that from a UI design perspective, they could have kept that consistent if you'd played X-Wing, but they chose. It's almost like a fictional choice. You know what I mean? To keep the red guys, the Empire Red, and the green.
Red is the symbol of power.
Well, it is, but then you're shooting. My point is you're shooting at green guys.
Yeah,
right?
no,
you're shooting at the friendlies in a way, and I think that I don't know. Who knows?
It is a thing that actually distracts me.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I often find myself like pulling around and looking for a green target because, I mean, one of the things that this game doesn't have and later games added was, target under sight, and target somebody who's attacking me, and like as many keys as this game uses on the keyboard, it still doesn't have some things that I think were in like Alliance. And
mine. I have those in mine.
Really?
You mean target the target in my sight?
Is there a target in my sight, the character that I haven't found?
What do you mean? Yeah, I can point at a ship and target it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know how to do that.
Well, I'm using a flight stick, so maybe I don't know.
I'm also using a flight stick, but
so yeah. Anyway.
Okay, so maybe I need to read the manual some more because I mean, there's no tutorialization for that.
No. Well, and the K.
But there is a tutorialization for a lot of other stuff. Just in terms of targeting and how to fly and all that stuff. I mean, I spent a lot of time
which I skipped
in the simulators.
Yeah, I skipped. I haven't played any simulators.
Okay, yeah, I did the just sort of fly the ship through the obstacle course and shoot stuff, and that's fun. And then, it's funny. It's like a minimal level design. It's like, oh, I'm going to fly you in a circle, in segmented circle for as long as you want to fly, and etc.
Yeah, I wasn't.
And then there's a combat one, and the combat ones actually get a lot tougher, a lot faster. So, but anyway, it's a tough game. The combat in this game is very deadly.
What difficulty are you playing on?
I'm actually playing on easy.
Okay, me too. From my Resident Evil experience,
you decided
I was going to make sure.
I honestly think this is a game that if you played on a harder level, you'd have needed to have been playing them for a while.
It is rough. It is like surgical.
Because I started on medium, and I was like, "Whoa, this is way harder.
Yeah,
way harder than I expected that to be."
You need to be surgical. It's almost like, and we talked about this in pre-show, and Brett and I have a friend, Reed Knight, who is one of the main testers on this game, and he will tell you it is basically like a puzzle game. Is my memory of his stories, because he had to test all the difficulties, of course, and make sure that hard was possible and tuned and everything. And on hard, you basically have to play it like a puzzle game. You have to do things in a certain order and hit everything at the right time and not take a hit. And
that's
advanced techniques.
That's pretty insane.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I kind of want to close sort of the introduction to the series. Before we go directly into sort of tactical battle stuff with, an observation that this is very different from any of the other games we've played yet, in that there aren't really a lot of games like this anymore.
We've
mostly played games that have a modern analog that, we could do a bonus content episode basically for any of the games we played, and we only started doing them recently, but any of the games we've played, there are games that have been made recently in the last couple of years that are high profile, and that people know about, that follow in the mold of those games. And this one, this is an evolutionary dead end as far as video games go. I mean, there's not.
Well,
there are deeper flight sims still out there.
There is an elephant in the room that we could, I think, directly link to this to some degree that is unproven and unknown, but is a hot topic, and that's Star Citizen.
Oh, fair point.
You know what I mean? Because, yes, it's not
point.
Officially out yet, but when it comes to the legacy of... And we talked about this with the adventure game with Dot, right?
I mean, part of me is like, that game is never coming out. So
well, no,
I just
of course. And so, is it vaporware or not? There's all that, right? But it's in early access. People are technically playing it now. And playing this is... And now that I've got a flight stick has made me want to try to jump into that as much as I probably shouldn't. But I guess my point is... We talked about the ebb and flow of the adventure game genre with Day the Tentacle, right? And kind of like, even with Tim and Dave, we talked about like that lull, right? And then the resurgence with Telltale or what have you. And I hear people talk about that same, like with similar, using similar words with Star Citizen and some of the other stuff. There's some other Kickstarters out there. Like there's a Descent reboot and a couple other things that are kind of in the same vein. In the same way that we talk about that adventure game stuff, right? Like people, I don't know if it's a nostalgia for us old timers or what it is, but for some reason, people think that this is a genre that needs to come back. Now, of course, it won't be as simulator based as this one is, because to your point, one of the reasons I think this has become either a dead genre or a extremely niche genre, because there still are military flight sims, on Steam that you can buy, but it's like Arma, right? It's like played by a very select group. Exactly.
Yeah, small,
but they're so damn hardcore that it's not going to be a mainstream.
It's grognard captured for sure.
Yeah, it's not going to be mainstream like it used to be. And do you remember? Like, am I wrong in thinking my comment about like flight sims being like the poster child for playing PC games back in the day? I feel like they were like the cutting edge, like, I don't know, racing games today or something, right?
They were. That's absolutely true. I mean, something like F-16?
Yes, F-16, yeah.
That was the one I was thinking. Or Falcon.
Falcon was the one I mentioned.
Falcon was the series that kind of went, there was a Falcon 1.0, 2.0, 3.0.
And the manual was like a textbook.
Darren Stinnett, who we worked for, had worked on a Russian expansion for Falcon 3 or 4.0.
Spectrum Holobyte.
For Spectrum Holobyte called MiGs.
Oh, yeah, right.
Or MiG, whatever the MiG, plane was for the Russians. And so, but those games are insane. Like, I mean...
Yeah.
I tried to play an F-22 game when I first went to LucasArts. And... by then, the genre had already been so grognard captured that it was very, very difficult.
You just love saying that.
I do. It's a great word. To even understand, like, what was going on. And,
you couldn't even take off.
And fun. Yeah, I couldn't. I mean, I couldn't taxi. That's how bad it was. I could not taxi. And Darren's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, and I'm moving the joystick, right and left to try to turn the plane. And he's like, "No, you gotta yaw. You gotta use some, you would normally use pedals if you had a decent setup here, but maybe twist or whatever." I mean, he had, I don't know if it was a keyboard thing or whatever. I just literally had no perspective on the whole simulator genre at that point. And that was actually at the point at which we started becoming a flight action game.
Yeah.
For Starfighter.
And that's where
because Darren looked at that and said, "Here's a smart guy who has not been playing these games."
Well, let's not. Yeah.
Well, here's a guy who's not been playing these games, and despite the fact that he's dumb as a 2x4, he can't get the plane off the runway.
Yeah.
So it
Another thing happened though too. I think that there was the stuff that you and Darren were doing, but the other thing was Shadows of the Empire, right? And the sequence with the snow speeders, and then Rogue Squadron, right?
Right.
And that concept of well, and even going back to Vector X-Wing, right? Arcade,
right? And I think we didn't want to move. We didn't want to move as far as Rogue to be flight action.
No. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying as far as like pulling this genre. I remember these conversations, pulling this genre through that process, right? Which really every genre goes through an accessibility and usability process, right? And is still going through that today. But at this time, to your point, like with Falcon and everything, there were a lot of flight sims on the market, right? That was the hot.
There were 2 sims for the F-22.
Yeah.
Which is a plane that I don't
Warthog
even like. I've never seen. Yeah, there were 2. There were at least 2 sims to the Warthog, which is a plane that has a longer history. But like the F-22, when I was playing this, an F-22 sim in 1998. There were 2 F-22 sims on the market.
Yeah.
And I just I think about that and I go, how is that even possible? It's a plane that I've never seen in the flesh. I've seen a lot of planes. Like, I live in the D.C. area. I've been to the Smithsonian Air and Space hangar that's out in Virginia. I've seen a lot of planes. And I've never seen an F-22. Like, I have no sense of what an F-22 looks like except in a simulation.
But it's sims in general. It was just something about that era of gaming that, there were helicopter sims, submarine sims, and it's just that sense of simulation and that, I have a PC at home that can do this was sort of, even Microsoft Flight Simulator, that was impressive to people, right? But then it just never could go beyond its heavy weight of usability.
Right, yeah. It had a hard time breaking out from the, we're going to simulate every aspect of this experience. And this game actually doesn't quite go that far. But it's still too far for a general audience.
Right, agreed. But that's what I was going to say. With this, and not being a big Wing Commander fan, but I'll put Wing Commander in here as well. With X-Wing and TIE Fighter and Wing Commander, this was, I think, the significance of this series and these games is, I believe, and I don't think I'm giving it too much credit, but basically the bridge, right? It's the where you see something like Star Wars, which is a mass market property, put onto a sim, but starting to strip away, even in Larry's games, if you play, and this is my vague memory, right? It's been a long time, but if you play them, starting to get more usable as they go on, right? And this one's still not quite there, right? But you could see where it needed to go. And then when you start putting properties on top of it like Star Wars, then it's like, okay, now we have to break away from the sim because the people who want to play Star Wars are not going to play these.
Yeah, no, and that's the next one. I mean, that was always our Star Wars problem.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right, I mean, that was like, hey, we have this thing that's going to bring people in. Yeah. It was a Star Wars problem and a Star Wars opportunity because there were a fair number of games being made when we started that were cash-ins, on the Star Wars property that were just like, let's put a skin on whatever. And, they weren't all as good as a Dark Forces. And I'm not even going to name names because I know people who worked on all of those games. And I don't want to badmouth anybody. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely a bridge title for sure.
You can see the trajectory coming, and there was just enough, you can get into the heavy sim of it, but the other nostalgia that's kind of rushing back to me playing this, and for me it's, I guess, a little bit weird because I tested X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, and so I'm having a lot of weird emotions playing this game because XVT was not far from TIE Fighter.
That's why I chose it.
And, so it's like there's this sense of very familiar feel when I started playing again, and it's cool, but it's also like, yeah, you remember it's the boundaries that it really has, right? For why somebody I don't know if we'll hear from any of the audience and who, if anyone, is playing along with us this time, but it would be interesting to hear if there's anybody out there playing with us that has never played it before,
I'd love to
what
hear
their reactions are to just hit the K key,
guys. Yeah,
the K key with all the keyboard commands. You're like, what? And literally uses every key almost, right? And this
I've been playing this. Yeah, I've been playing this with my, mostly on this laptop that I'm sitting in front of now. So that's directly in front of me. To my right, of course, is this ridiculous joystick.
Yeah.
With I'm counting.
Yeah, I think
at least 12 buttons, maybe 14 buttons, and then 4 analog inputs. And I'm like, okay. And then to my left, while I was playing it, I had my iPad open on a stand so that I could look at the key commands. So that, because I'm flipping through the manual and I'm like, obviously I missed something because there's things I didn't know I could do. It's a lot, it's. I mean,
I still don't have my joystick or my flight stick, all the keys mapped, all the buttons mapped where I want
I did
them.
remap a lot of buttons.
Like I remapped a bunch, but it's like every time I play a mission, I go back and I fine tune and.
Yeah, no, I've definitely had things that I've been like, that's not.
Yeah.
That's not great, and a lot of times I'm just like, well, I've kind of gotten used to that now. Maybe I should wait and make it, really important.
And I remember loving that whole process. I mean, don't get Reed started on that. Like you get your perfect, button config.
Well,
when you're just
had on Starfighter, QA argued that we had to have a roll and pull configuration for the flight sticks, on a PlayStation controller, PlayStation 2 controller, because that was the ideal way to fly.
Yeah, that's right.
That was the best way to fly that game.
That was a big debate.
And that was a big deal to them, and we made it like the third, flight configuration, and they weren't happy that it was just the third or whatever. I mean, it's just a whole huge argument.
Yeah, significant. Oh man. Significant game and just Sims. I'm glad we talked about the Sim stuff in general. I wasn't sure how much we'd hit it, but even though this isn't a World War II or a modern combat, flight simulation game, it's close enough into that genre that it's an important thing. We're not going to play another one of these for probably a long time, if ever. I think we have to talk about this genre overall, and I think this is a good entry point for people who've never played one of those anyway.
Oh yeah,
just to get a taste of the insanity.
If we were to give you Falcon 3.0,
yeah, we would.
With its 200-page manual,
people would stop listening.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would just be like, hey, you record the podcast this week. I don't know.
No, me too. I'm out. Yeah.
So anyway, let's we've gone about 45 minutes. Let's talk a little bit about the missions that we have. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the interface as well, because I think that's really important. There are some really nice touches in this. In particular, it's got a virtual mouse, and actually, the Windows 10 implementation actually doesn't hide the mouse cursor.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of broken, but you had to do what you had to do. This was fine back when you only had a single thing running on your machine. It does a really good job of automatically moving your mouse to the next thing that's of interest.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a battle, you go and it lets you click on the battle, schematic, with the briefing to tell you what's going to happen. And the guy tells you, oh, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, we're going to do that. You're in this group, your job is this, etc. And then if you have special secret orders from the Emperor, it just moves your mouse over there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't have to do that. And when you're done talking to that guy, it moves your mouse down to the go straight to the battle. Or the mission. What I love about that is there's a certain amount of visual clutter there. It's not obvious what order you should be doing things.
No.
Like it's not top to bottom, it's not left to right. There's no obvious order to these things. I mean, you're naturally drawn to the character who only shows up at certain times, which is the secret envoy or whatever. But like, I would have been like clicking around, like trying to find the pixel for an adventure game to find the actual intermission thing, because it's kind of below.
Yeah, it's not.
There's a lot of sort of subliminal stuff here, like, oh yeah, you have to go down here. Like I'm going to stay back here and have the high level view of this battle, and you have to go down a couple flights and go out this small door to go to your ship. You know,
it's not completely intuitive.
It's not intuitive, but it also reinforces the fiction. So it's good, and I really like the fact that they got around the sort of weirdness of like, oh, where do I go next, by just telling you, like just moving the mouse for you, which is a thing that we would never do today.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a thing we would just not do. Because that's just so, you'd have to, because at that point you're hunting for the mouse pointer. Like, what am I doing next? Oh, it's over there. Oh, it's over there. You know, it's like James Taylor following a laser pointer. Where is that thing now? Call back to the first part of the episode.
Well done.
So it jumps around in a very non-intuitive way, and at the same time, I'm like, this is perfect. Like, to tie in the fiction that they have, and they've made this sort of 3D space, even if they didn't represent it in 3D, who knows? It feels like a 3D space. It feels like a real space, and they just kind of guide the player to like, oh, this is what you want to do next. And they do the same thing in the debrief. Like, oh, you want to talk to this guy first. And if the secret envoy is there, oh, you want to talk to him next. Oh, and hey, here's the door out. So it's, the flow is really managed for you, which is really nice. I really like that.
Yeah, the whole concourse wrapper and yeah, I mean, you mentioned it already, but having that sort of sense that you're on a Star Destroyer someplace, or that's likely where you're at. But it just really adds to the whole feel of the pilot, being that pilot. I don't remember in the World War II games that Larry did if they did that.
I don't feel like they did.
Yeah, I don't think so either. We'll have to look at that for next episode. But
I feel like
it ended up being a really important.
Had more of a.
I feel
like it was more similar to like Call of Duty, where you had like a screen.
Yeah, maybe I think so.
Briefed you on what was next.
Yeah. Or I was thinking
that's my sense.
I'll have to go back and look.
It's been like 18 years, so I mean, I have no.
Or there might have been. You might have been on the airfield or something like that. But
oh yeah, that could be.
But the point being is that I feel like that, and I may be giving it too much credit again because I forget if Wing Commander did this as well. But that I also felt like was a part of the identity of Larry's Star Wars games, right? That there's this sense that you are a pilot living and immersed into the Star Wars fiction, and it'd be interesting, if we are able to get him on to talk about like how that came to be and whether that was kind of a Lucasfilm influence or whether that was from him kind of setting that goal, because it's an important part of the fantasy. And then when you're flying, when you're in the sim, which we'll probably talk about more deeply in a second, you're in the sim, right? Like you're there, and it is very simulated, and the pulp of it is kind of more minimalistic at that point, right? The wrapper of it. So those interstitial areas and cinematics and stuff are actually really critical to pulling you back to Star Wars, because when you're in the sim, the Star Wars is there, but it's not, it's very minimalistic. Other than the VO, I think the VO helps a lot, but in the audio. But anyway, yeah, it's a signature thing, and I think it's one of the reasons that this really stuck with people as well. And it was ripped off ever since. You could even say like StarCraft, has a lot of this stuff. StarCraft 2 even, right, still has a lot of this sort of like motif of presenting you with these facades of a concourse of some kind that you're just that is basically just your interface, your front end, but it's a fictionalized front end. And I don't, obviously I don't necessarily know that this started with X-Wing and TIE Fighter, but it was one of the most prominent.
Yeah, but I mean, it's certainly, these sorts of things influence people further down the line, whether they know it or not.
Yeah.
I think that, where is he going to go with that? I feel like, I'm lost. I don't know what I'm going to say. I was going somewhere, but at the same time, I was trying to find the swaddle. Oh,
the front end. Yeah.
The front end, just to get some sense of what that thing was about. And I don't think it was like that at all. I found the manual, and it doesn't look like it was like that at all. So it is a definite different sort of thing.
So
go.
Yeah, well, do we want to start hitting some of the battle stuff and the sim at all, or how do?
Yeah, no. Let's talk about the actual experience of flying a TIE Fighter. One of the things that's great about this thing right off the bat is that I think in the first, 4 battles or whatever, you fly a fighter, a TIE Fighter, a TIE Bomber, a TIE interceptor, I think it's called, and a gunboat, which is a ship you see in the movies, but I don't think you see fight. So you see.
I don't know if you see a gunboat in the movies.
I don't think you see one fighting. I think you see one as like a transport ship.
I might challenge you on that, but we'll roll with it.
I think you're wrong. I think the Emperor actually flies on one of those things.
Well, there's the Tydirium shuttles, but the gunboats, I believe, were built for these games. But anyway,
I thought they looked an awful lot like
they're based on them. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So there's some fine detail here that I'm missing out on. Wow, Yoda.
Oh, jeez.
About the nerdy.
I could be wrong, but I did.
I thought that's what he loaded Darth Vader onto at the end of Return of the Jedi.
It was a Tydirium shuttle, dude. Come on.
Oh my God! It's like exactly the same. It's got the 3 wings and then 1 fold, 2 fold down. Oh my God!
No, the gunboat has like 5 wings. But anyway,
the gunboat does not have 5 wings. Oh my God! You're like those razor blade companies. Like shove some more blades in there. Wow.
Anyway, yes, to your point, it is awesome that they walk you through the course very quickly.
Very quickly, yeah.
Which is nice.
And they also sort of tantalize you by the third mission with another, the TIE, advanced. Or
such a good introduction to that ship because you hope, I guess, at the time that you're going to... Well, I guess this is a bit of a spoiler, huh? For those who've never played, but you hope you'll get to fly that thing, right? Because you're escorting it, and you're like, "Oh, that thing's cool." And TIE, was it advanced? Is that what they call it?
TIE advanced. Yeah.
It's a TIE interceptor, but they've coined it the TIE advanced. They're like, "Oh, that thing looks cool." And then, spoiler, you will get to fly it eventually.
Yeah, you will get to fly. You can fly it in the simulator. So
and the other thing about flying the TIEs, though, and I'll channel Reed a little bit. Maybe we should have Reed on just to have him give his perspective.
Maybe a couple weeks from now.
Yeah, he might enjoy that. But anyway, he'll have an interesting perspective that would be very different from Larry's. But anyway, the thing that Reed always loved to talk about is that coming from X-wing where you're flying, essentially like an F-16 of space, right? Like It's got shields, it's got awesome 4 cannons, it has missiles, it's like a fully decked out cool ship. All of actually the Rebel ships are very fully featured for the most part. And then if you're a big fan of X-Wing and then TIE Fighter comes out and then you start, and also in X-Wing when you're fighting the enemy, you're shooting this popcorn, right, in TIE Fighters because they're so weak. And so you're just blowing them out of the sky because they're these little unshielded weak craft. And then you start TIE Fighter, the sequel to the game, as the bad guys in one of those tin cans.
Right.
And you are very vulnerable, right? And you can't even run into something or you'll blow up.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no shields, right? You have no missiles when you start. And so it's like the purest, minimalistic way to fly in space.
And if you play the sort of combat tutorials, it'll tell you, like, don't fly straight at something.
Yeah, right.
Like, don't do it. They'll shoot you out of the sky. Like, it's telling you, this is how our AI works. It's going to find where you are, and within, half a second, it's going to shoot there, and if you're not kind of moving on a weird kind of, zigzaggy pattern, you're going to get,
Yeah, it's pretty unforgiving, yeah.
Yeah, no, it really is. Even at different difficulty levels, even at easy, it's like, you cannot... There's no press button win game in this difficulty level. I mean, this is not an easy level.
No, I mean, the only thing for anyone out here that might get discouraged, that maybe, I don't think we talked about it already, but they did put the cheats.
There are cheats, yes. So if you hit this, I think escape.
Yeah.
Oh, even just hitting escape, I think in the middle of a...
That's what I mean,
yeah.
The main options.
There are options to have infinite ammo,
and then invulnerable,
and then
right?
to be invulnerable, and to also have no collision with other ships.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it's it's an honor system. You can, but
So what I tend to do is I tend to play and get all the main missions with limited ammo and vulnerability.
The primary objectives.
Yeah. Because as we talked about, some of the secondary objectives tend to follow afterwards.
Yeah.
Not always, but often. And at that point, I'm like, well, I don't want to die at this point. because I'm already 10 minutes in.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll just turn on invulnerability.
Yeah, that's probably good policy for this playthrough.
I do actually. I always leave the limited ammo on because I think a key point of the game is the sort of energy management of like, I'm going to manage my. So you basically have 2 to 3 vectors of where your craft is going to put its energy. You can put it into pure speed. You can put it into laser recharging, or you can put it into shields, and you can kind of manage that, you know, as much as you want. Not every ship has shields, so it's only like the gunboat and the interceptor that have shields. I assume the advanced will have that as well. But you are managing that.
The most hilarious moment, and I'd love to hear if this has happened to somebody. That I forgot about and obviously quickly remembered once it happened to me, but the hilarious moment to when you rebalance your energy toward anything other than lasers and you forget that you've done it and your lasers are basically just draining. You run out.
You have this heavy sound and then it's like pew, 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 and you do like 6 of those and then you have no lasers.
Yeah, and then they're out and you're like, wait, what?
Where's my lasers?
A game where you can actually turn your main guns off by, you know, making a decision to... I don't know. It's just such an old school mentality that just wouldn't fly these days, you know, other than some niche thing.
Well,
but
I have done that.
Yeah, me too, yeah.
I've definitely done that.
But
it's mostly because, for one thing, I'm on a laptop keyboard and, like, the keys are very hard to read, especially the function keys. So it's like it's bound to F9, and I'm just like, oh my god. Like, I can't even see a 9 on that function key. I have to kind of feel for where it is. And I lose track of it, and, you know, I hit it a bunch of times, and I'm not looking at where it is. I'm like, I think I'm in the right spot.
Speed is the same thing, because all the speed keys are nearby, and it's easy to,
I bound those to the POV hat.
Yeah, and I need to do some of that too, but... The thing that I love, so, I mean, for those who aren't maybe playing, like, the interesting thing that you know, for anyone who's heard about these games, that when Brett's kind of running through the different energy management, there's also, like, controlling your shield orientation, where you can have your shields, you know,
front or back,
distribute them evenly, or you can have them all in the front and all in the back, and there's different tactical moments when you might want to do that, depending on who you're fighting, and then there's also, like, the speed management of pursuing somebody and what your energy for your engines is at, but also, like, matching speed and, you know, not going too fast. And there's all of these simmy little aspects in there that are pulled from other games, but you're in space, so they take liberties with physics and stuff, and it's not completely like flight in you know, in air, in an atmosphere. But
actually, more like flight in air than it is.
It's right. It's more. It's right. It's kind of somewhere in the middle, right?
There's
it's
no
like
gravity,
fictional space. It's right. Yes, it's not like Battlestar, right? Which is the fantasy of real space.
There's no momentum based.
New Battlestar, I mean. But anyway, the point I was going to make is, as daunting as that stuff is, the thing that I remember and that will come the further you play, and is quickly coming back to me, is, and maybe I'm over analyzing this for myself, but the fantasy fulfillment of piloting a Star Wars starfighter of any kind for me is so high, because I'm such a Star Wars geek. And when you are initially just so daunting to learn and understand all of this sort of sim management stuff of the craft, but once you get a handle of that, you feel like such a badass. You're like, I am a pilot. You know what I mean? And that's different from the Rogue or even our Starfighter games, right? Where it's like, yes, it's a flight action game, and I'm a badass all the time because it's just an accessible game where I'm just shooting stuff.
It's a power fantasy.
It's a power fantasy, but when you have to actually
work at it,
learn it, and you feel like you're in the academy, and you're like, oh, I totally messed that up because I totally forgot about this thing in this, you know, in my craft, or I misread this instrument. But when you get it and you master it like that, like I remember that being a golden moment where I'm like, yes, I am a TIE pilot, and that's a pretty cool thing that you're not going to get from a power fantasy game.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's something we talk about on occasion here on the podcast generally. Is just
that's true. For other
some of
games.
these older games have this... it's a tough bar to entry, where it's just like, we expect people to get good enough to play the game, and I think the modern analog, and Take a Drink is Dark Souls or Demon Souls or whatever.
Yep.
These are games that have
coming
brought it back, and why that's popular with a certain audience. Both a nostalgic audience, but also an audience that probably has been playing a lot of games in the last 10 years and have been waiting for something that challenges them in a different way. A lot of these older games have this sort of feel of like, you're going to have to learn some stuff, and you're just going to have to learn it, and you're going to mess up, and you're going to have to redo some stuff, and that's okay. It's fine. You're going to have to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the game. And, a lot of those edges have been smoothed out and in some cases eradicated completely. And, on the one hand, we've lost that. But on the other hand, when I say we're a small part of that audience, right? So it's not...
Yeah. It's not for everybody. Yeah, and that's why...
It really isn't.
And that's why I'm happy that we talk about... you're right. We've talked about this various times because we're playing older games, but Dark Souls, what have you. But indie games are able to take some of those risks, on looking and going after those niche audiences for a punishing game or some, the roguelikes that are, just popping out and have been for a while are good examples, right? Where there's enough of an audience to have some of those punishing games, but you add in some of that in modern game development in there to make them more accessible, and sometimes you end up successfully bridging that gap, nicely. And that's why this has kind of rekindled my interest in Star Citizen, because I'm hoping, and I don't want to, burst my own bubble here, but I'm hoping that they've brought in enough modern conventions to make a space sim, a good space sim for today. Anyway, I'll be optimistic at least.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the thing I haven't followed at all. I mean, I just... For me, the big story of Star Citizen has been
it's not about the game.
Model.
Yeah, it's
more
not
than anything else. Like
which is unfortunate, right? Because it looks beautiful and there's a lot going for it, but it's been a weird road for that thing.
Okay, so last couple points, I guess. One thing is that these missions can be quite long, way longer than I remember, and certainly longer than we aimed for in any Starfighter mission. At least in terms of dead space. There's there are a couple missions, there's one in particular that's like almost 20 minutes, and...
Well, there's one that starts off in the briefing that says, your first craft will come in at 15 minutes, or something like that. And I'm like,
exactly.
Wow,
like,
no.
What? Come on, give me a break. In 15 minutes, something's going to happen?
Which really means there's going to be a surprise before that, but still, it's like, it's a weird... sense of setting
you would never do that today.
Yeah, exactly.
And you would never do a lot of these things today, just in terms of like, we've already talked about how if you're doing this sort of Secret Order of the Emperor bonus missions or bonus objectives, those are going to turn up maybe at the end of all the fighting, and you're just going to fly around and find stuff and scan it and go back.
I'm experimenting, as I have been trying to do with my playthrough, because I played this TIE Fighter, I think, 2.5 times maybe over my life, etc. But every time I've played, I play completionist, right? Because I just can't not do that.
Yeah, no.
So I do everything.
I'm the same way.
This time I'm not doing that. Some of it might be due to speed, because I know I'm going to need to save time somehow so we can get through this. But I'm curious to see how they handle stuff when it comes to progression, because I only do the primary objectives, and I do secondaries if they're convenient, but I'm kind of like not consistent. So once to your point about length, some of them have, for me, have actually been very short because I finished the primary objectives very quickly, like within a couple minutes sometimes, and then I'm like, well, I could just hyper out now, or I could just go back to the ship and finish, and sometimes I just do. And so I go back and like the cloaked figure is like, you didn't do any stuff I asked you to do.
Right.
And the thing is I didn't realize that they had accounted for, they basically have that branching alternate, right? And
I mean, the sad thing though is I feel like from some memory of this game that basically what's going to happen is you will get as much of that story as you put into.
Yeah,
like, and it doesn't actually branch. You just get...
No, I don't mean branching, but it's like they had to account for the possibilities.
It's length 10, and you're going to get length 5 because you only did half of them.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a branching path by any means.
What I'm saying, Tim, is I'm going to have a much cooler tattoo than you are.
Well, that's my point. Is that, and I'm going to be pissed when it happens because I will miss out. But I've already gotten that tattoo, so I'm a long time ago. But
I'm going to take a screenshot. I'm going to mail it to you.
But I want to see
Bob Page. 51.
Yeah, exactly. But I wanted to experiment because I wanted to see kind of how I felt about. I guess long story short, what I'm saying is, I think a lot of the charm of this game is in that stuff, but they call it secondary and bonus objectives, and which kind of implies you don't have to do it. And if all of the special sauce is really in that stuff, and you don't do it, like, what is it? How does it feel? And so I kind of wanted to go through the game and feel and get to the end and see, like, oh, I don't have the full tattoo and I don't have all the medals or whatever.
Well, I mean, the thing is, you don't know what the full tattoo looks like.
I get.
I mean, that's one of the nice things about something that's purely linear, is that you always feel a sense of accomplishment with what you've done. Because you get those rewards of like, oh, I got these cutscenes where they etched more of my tattoo in, and you go, oh, cool, that's pretty badass. I mean, it's on the pause screen or whatever. One of the pause screens. This game actually has multiple pause screens, which is bizarre. And you can like scroll over with your mouse and look and like mouse over your arm, and it pulls back your sleeve, and you can see your tattoo. And that's just like.
Well, no, that's so cool though. Yeah, so
it's totally
that's a good
cool.
point. What you don't know,
it's just totally strange. But you don't know
what you don't know what hurt you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing that we talked about. In our when we were developing things together was like it's okay to leave a sense of mystery or also just wanting more or whatever. That's fine because that sets you up for a sequel or whatever.
Well, there's that, but also the
going back and playing stuff again.
It's the sense of agency too. It's like, God, the debates that we sometimes have on a project where it's just like the effort put into stuff that is secondary and not feeling like the ROI is there and all that crap. It's like, man, no, it's like that gives the player agency.
Exactly, yeah.
Like if everything is mandatory, then it's like you're not. Anyway, don't get me started, soapbox.
Yeah. No, it's a big question. Something we can argue about on a future episode, I guess.
Yep, and we'll see. We'll see how I feel. I do know generally, what a full completionist feeling would
I'm
be.
gonna go online. I'm gonna see if I can find some Prozac from some vendor somewhere to help you out. I think we should kind of wrap things up. We actually didn't have a lot of feedback or anything this week, so I'm hopefully we'll get some for to kind of ask questions or give thoughts on TIE Fighter. It's definitely, this may be the furthest back we've gone. Is that true? This is 93.
Oh yeah, this one's 94, right?
I'm sorry, 94.
93.
Yep.
I feel like wasn't there was another 93? Wasn't Super Metroid 93?
Oh yes, yep, that's true. Yep.
Boy, we sure like a certain decade.
It's true.
Pretty much stayed in that.
I've spent a lot of time this past week playing BioShock, and I'm like looking forward to like 5 years from now on the podcast when we can talk about BioShock, because now I've played it 5 times.
Why? I guess tangent. But why are you playing? Why were you playing it? Just for fun?
It came out in a remastered collection.
Oh yeah, right.
Year or so, and I picked it up and I was like, oh yeah, I'd like to play those again. Yeah, we're not going to get into that But I did kill Andrew Ryan for the third time in a week today. So, poor Andrew Ryan. Golf club stuck in his head.
Yeah.
Spoilers. Yeah.
Oh,
Anyway.
and there's a little bit of a callback to System Shock 2 there. So you're you're a little bit on message there. So,
Yeah, I'm on message.
Oh, bonus.
Actually, that scene is among the best writing in games ever. So,
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah, someday we'll talk about that. So, 5 years from now, episode 200 of, I'm calling it now, episode 200 of the Dev Game Club, we're going to talk about Bioshock.
Well, and then Bob Page came up too, so, Deus
Ex 2.
1. Well, someday.
Oh, man. Okay. In the meantime, you can find the podcast on Twitter at DevGameClub. We'd love to have your feedback at devgameclub@gmail.com. And, of course, you can find us in iTunes at Dev Game Club and leave us a review. We've had a number of them. We've had some quite amusing ones that have come up. And I've read, things like "What's crack-a-lackin' my ding-dongs?" something like that on here on the podcast.
So proof that they will let you'll say many various things if you.
I'll say many
them.
various things. I may actually make up some things that are insulting to Tim and pretend like they were from a review. So just give me some more fodder.
That's clever.
To work with. And
I'll never know.
Do that. Yep, you won't know because you haven't subscribed to various feedback queues around the world. In the meantime, you can also find me at Brett_Duville on Twitter and him at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
Also on Twitter. And next week, I guess...
Yeah, how many battles are we going to play? Forget you.
So there's 13 total in this game, I believe.
Oh, I thought there was like 20-something. Okay, that makes me feel better.
It's 13 battles with 4 to 8 missions or something per. So I was thinking 4 for the next one.
Okay. So
we would play missions 4 through 7, or battles 4 through 7 with all the missions that are in them.
Mm-hmm.
That'll give us a little wiggle room to do 3 and 3 or whatever. If you don't make it, to do fewer or what have you.
Yeah. Okay.
So that should work. But yeah, aim to do battles 4 through 7. I actually don't remember a lot of the sort of macro story of this game.
Yeah, that's something. I had a bunch of notes on that stuff, just even from the first 3 battles. So I think, obviously, in the coming episodes, we should hit that more because
there's a number of things I also noticed about those things that we didn't talk about tonight. They're more about storytelling and sort of. Yeah. There's a lot of perspective changing and like.
So that's what I was going to say. Yeah, that like the Hoth battle was pretty simple and straightforward, but like once these 2 factions of pirates the 2 species in the Civil War and
all
this, like I can't
Dimok and the Ripoblus.
Yeah, I can't keep. I'm already confused again.
Exactly.
So clearly, I didn't pay attention the first few times, but yeah. So that's going to be we should definitely hit that stuff more in the future.
Okay. All right. Well, we will see you next week, and I hope you're playing along, and we'll talk to you then. Good night.
Good night.